Behaviour is an issue that never completely goes away for any school, and since 2006 teachers have had a clear legal right to discipline pupils. But a recent major report into school discipline said that despite these new powers, which cover both inside and outside the school gates, many teachers are still not quite clear about how to use them. Sir Alan Steer's final report on behaviour in 2009 reviewed the progress made on raising standards of behaviour in schools.
The extra powers that have been given to schools and to teachers over the years are often not known and often not understood. You know, we have a huge issue about dissemination. One of the things that depressed me in carrying out the review was a number of times you would get individual evidence from teachers saying something which actually wasn't right, that, you know, over things like, you know, power of restraint. There is a power of restraint. We have now a power of search, which is being expanded with the current bill. So it is an issue of people knowing what the powers are and having confidence.
So what are schools' legal powers on discipline? Teachers have the power to discipline pupils for breaking rules, for failing to follow instructions, or for other unacceptable behaviour, using sanctions agreed by the school's behaviour policy. The power to discipline extends beyond the school gate and covers detention, including evenings and weekends, confiscation of inappropriate items, searching pupils, screening for weapons, exclusion, fixed term and permanent, and the use of force to control or restrain pupils.
We will set a new behaviour challenge to ensure that behaviour is good in every school, but also that we will back head teachers to enforce discipline, but we will also say to parents, all of us too must back our teachers to use the powers they've got to enforce discipline.
The government wants behaviour in all schools to be assessed as good or better by 2012. Inspectors have a clear role in assessing behaviour.
Behaviours is not a limiting judgment in the terms of Ofsted's understanding of the phrase, but in effect, in practice, it acts as a limiting judgment, and that was the case before the Secretary of State's announcement, because in fact any of the outcomes, if they're inadequate, would result in the overall outcomes judgment being inadequate, because this inspection arrangement, the new arrangements, are about all the outcomes: achievement, behaviour, safety, health and so on. If any one of those is not right, how can we say that outcomes are satisfactory? They're not. So behaviour, as all the others, would operate in that way.
Since your report, the government's made it quite clear it intends to bear down on behaviour in schools, particularly through Ofsted. Do you think that's right?
Well, I do, because I know it's tough and it sounds tough, but I do believe it's in the power of schools to actually impact on standards of behaviour. You know, I don't hold a culture of despair. I think it is possible to make significant change. You do need to judge the context you're in, and that has to be taken as a given. But if we don't address behaviour issues where they occur, what are we doing? We're leaving the other children in a situation where their learning is prevented. That's not right. We're leaving teachers in a position where they can't actually do what they want to do, they're committed to do, they're skilled to do because of behaviour problems. But let's concentrate on the kids who are misbehaving. What's going to happen to them? What's their future?
To find out more, I've come to Bitton Park School in Southampton, where in 2001 Ofsted inspectors rated behaviour poor. It's now outstanding.
I think the main thing teachers need to have is real confidence in their senior managers. I think if they can see that their own rules in the classroom are going to be backed and supported, that everybody is using a very clear sanction system, teachers themselves then become more confident. And I think when teachers say that behaviour is something they're concerned about, quite often it is because they're not getting the backing for trying to stand the ground in their own classrooms. And I think we've shown that by working as a whole school on this, everybody understands what the system is, and that means that every classroom is run in a very similar way.
Schools now have to have a behaviour policy. Is that something very burdensome? How detailed does it have to be?
It's not. No, we've got a very detailed policy that's reviewed annually, and what we do is actually look at any trends and issues that might be emerging that, for instance, might not be in the policy. So over recent years, we've had teachers have had quite a lot of experiences with Facebook issues, mobile phone issues, being recorded. So I will always go back to the governors to recommend that it's reviewed again, and another sentence or description or category would be added, just to make sure that everything is covered. And that is the clear message, really, that if you've made a very clear statement of what you can and can't do in relation to just about everything, you'll usually find that you've got the evidence to stand your ground and say this is why we don't allow it at this school.
Now you're going to duplicate that layer.
A school's behaviour policy lays out the rewards and sanctions agreed by the head, governors, staff, parents and pupils. Government guidance says these can include one-to-one admonishment, removal from the group in class, withdrawal from a particular lesson or peer group, withdrawal of access to the school IT, not being allowed to take part in a school trip or event, withdrawal of break or lunchtime privileges, or requiring pupils to carry out a useful task in school.
Can you just explain to us then the range of punishments that there are if pupils do misbehave?
Well, on the first occasion there's normally just a verbal warning given, but if it continues the teacher gives it sets a 15-minute detention, which can either be at break time, lunchtime or after school, and then if it carries on they give a 45-minute detention, and again if it progresses, it doesn't happen very often, but there is the power to give an hour 20, and also if they're in a lot of trouble, if they've done something very bad, they can be referred to the senior management, who come in and take them out the lesson to save the teacher having to disrupt the rest of the class's learning.
And if they continually disrupt you, you can write their names down on a piece of paper. So the whole school, in each year groups, go down to the hall and you sit in exam conditions and write down which pupils are disrupting your lessons, and then they get taken out. From my personal opinion, if someone's disrupting my lesson, then I don't have a problem with telling someone if they are, because it's what you're going to do for your career. If they're affecting that and affecting your chances of getting a job and getting on in life.
We have a good reward system as well. If you behave well in a lesson, the teacher has the option of either writing a positive incident sheet, where they will then send a copy of that to the department head, the head of year and also the tutor, and also a letter home as well.
The power to discipline pupils applies beyond the school gate, including journeys to and from school.
You could often find that the bullying may well be on the way to school. It wouldn't mean that then we wouldn't get involved in sorting that out. We also think that if a student is still wearing a bit and part uniform, that at all times they are representing the school. Of course, as well, even if something was at a weekend, if it directly related back to something where, for instance, a teacher was abused or something whilst out and about in their own time, if the link is in fact because they know they're a teacher, that does actually mean that there can be a school-related issue when everybody comes back in on the Monday.
Schools can use detention for pupils under 18 if agreed in the school's behaviour policy. Outside school hours, parents need 24 hours written notice. They may let the school know of any difficulties, but may not overrule the decision. To confiscate an item, teachers must decide if confiscation is a reasonable sanction. There is a specific statutory defence for teachers which covers confiscation, keeping hold of and disposing of any item.
The main thing you have to do there is have a clear governor's policy which is implemented, that means that we have a right to stop, search, confiscate, and as long as the rules are clear to students, then there isn't any, in my view, argument about it.
What about circumstances where teachers confiscated a mobile phone, say, and either the child or the parent say, that's theft, I want it back?
Well, it isn't theft, actually, if it's a quite clear rule that they shouldn't have it in the school in the first case. What we would do is perhaps have a period of having confiscated it. For instance, if there was, in fact, abusive or unreasonable messages on there, I'm actually within my powers to actually pass that on to our police officer. We work very closely with our community police officer.
Searching pupils and their possessions is a power for heads, but not a duty. Pupils, bags and lockers can be searched or screened for weapons, illegal drugs, alcohol or stolen property. A search can happen without consent if there are reasonable grounds. But teachers cannot be required to undertake searches or screening of pupils.
Okay, if I can just interrupt you a moment.
Yeah, hi.
Can you explain why you use this wand?
I think it's very much a deterrent, actually. I think if the students know that this is something available to me, then it might make them even more cautious, because of course our school policy and governor's policy means that we can actually search them at any time.
This is the Advisory Centre for Education. It's a national charity which runs a helpline for parents of school-aged children, offering them advice on legal issues and on school procedures. Many of the 10,000 or more calls it receives every year relate to behavioural issues, such as exclusions.
Parents ring up and say that their child's been excluded either for a fixed period or permanently, and we find out from talking to them what the root cause is very often of that.
What are the causes of things going wrong when it gets to the point where parents feel they need to ring you?
Very often it's unmet SEN. Schools should monitor behaviour as much really as they monitor educational attainment, and try and make it structured so that they can identify when a child is starting to cause a problem, maybe by having a series of detentions or something, and at that point they should start trying to put strategies in place. We find that schools that use their resources well, in terms of, say, partnering well with the local authority and with outside agencies, do well in controlling these problems before they become exclusions.
On exclusions, is there still a problem with the independent panels overturning exclusions?
We've had real concerns about independent appeals panels, and we still retain those concerns. Although guidance to them has improved over the last decade, we still find they make perverse decisions. But what's more worrying for us is now it's running at about 50-50 of actually head teachers' judgment being second-guessed by governing bodies. So our attention is actually starting to turn to governing bodies that are not actually backing the professional judgment of teachers and head teachers.
If a teacher in a classroom is faced with a persistently difficult child in their classroom, what sanctions are available to them?
That sort of scenario is one which a lot of teachers will relate to. I've never had a problem with, if you've got that sort of situation, it needs to be diffused. You do not want confrontations. That's only going to make matters worse. If a teacher is in that situation, they need to be able to diffuse it by perhaps the child being removed for whatever time is necessary. But if a child is removed out of a class, it's got to be for a purpose. It's got to be for a purpose of changing that behaviour so the child can return and hopefully behave differently. There's a whole range of issues coming out of that. Is the issue related to the child? Are there issues related to the support that teacher's been given in terms of training?
Schools should have a policy on the use of force to control or restrain pupils. Staff can use reasonable force to prevent a pupil from committing a criminal offence, causing injury or damage, or prejudicing good order. Schools may be asked to report significant incidents where force has been used from autumn 2010. Whether or not you believe that behaviour in schools is improving, there's no denying the fact that the government is bearing down on discipline. That may seem to pass the buck to individual teachers, but the reality is that without a commitment to a whole school behaviour policy, there's only so much that an individual classroom teacher can do.